Hey, what's up, friends? Welcome to our mental strength series, our master class, if you will, on how to develop mental strength. Let me tell you a little story to start with. On April 27th, 1983, a 61-year-old potato farmer showed up at the beginning of a 544-mile foot race in overalls and work boots. What happened next fundamentally changed what we know about achievement and mental strength. You want to know what it was? Join us for the rest of the story. I'm Dr. Nathan Pallai. Welcome to Speed Tribe. In the next lessons, we are going to teach you everything you need to know to develop the mental strength to dominate in sports and life. You ready? All right, let's go. So like I was saying, the 61-year-old potato farmer shows up in overalls and work boots to a 544-mile foot race. Everybody just thinks he's another old farmer there to watch and cheer on the elite athletes and competitors. But when the gun goes off and the other athletes leap off the lines in their thin, light shorts and racing tank tops and racing shoes, Cliff Young, that's the old potato farmer, he shuffles after them. Like literally shuffles because he's a 61-year-old farmer in work boots and overalls. He's old, so he shuffles slowly. Throughout the day, they ran. The thing about watching running, it's boring to begin with. You either gotta really love running or love the person who is running to watch the race. I speak from personal experience. I ran cross country in high school. My mom and dad were always there, but they kind of had to. I think even they were bored on a regular basis. I know they were bored on a regular basis. But you really knew a girl liked you if she came and watched your race. That's real love to watch running. Or maybe she just liked the shorts. I don't know. Anyway, watching ultra marathons is even more boring. They just run. Like, if you're watching the Super Bowl, you get up to go to the bathroom, you might miss a critical play or more importantly, even like a critical commercial. That is not the case with ultra marathons. You could take a bathroom break, a lunch break. You could even watch all of Endgame Avengers. And when you came back, they'd still just be running. Or in the case of Cliff Young, shuffling. So he's slow, he's 61, he's in work boots, and he is way far behind anybody else in the race. But when night comes and it gets too dark to see, all the other competitors go to the side of the road and sleep for at least 6 hours so that they could have the energy necessary to run for the next 18 hours the next day. This is when something extraordinary and at the same time completely ordinary happens. Cliff just keeps running. In fact, he runs all night. He shuffled straight past all the other sleeping competitors, and they didn't even know the next morning when they staggered upright, still stiff from sleeping on the ground to begin another day of grueling running, that he had passed them. And he just kept going. He kept running, barely sleeping, like not even resting for the next 5 days, 15 hours and 4 minutes. When he approaches the finish line, they're not even ready for him. They're basically like putting up the finish line still because the previous record for that distance took another 2 days, not hours. In fact, he finishes 10 hours before the nearest elite competitor, a 61-year-old potato farmer. Shocked, the race organizers asked how he did it. And he was like, I just ran. In fact, he told them he grew up the oldest of 7 kids during the Great Depression on a sheep farm in Australia. Their farm was about 2,000 acres, and they would graze about 2,000 sheep on the farm. Occasionally, cyclones, which is what's called a hurricane over there in the Pacific, would blow towards Australia, where the Youngs had their farm. And Cliff was sent out on foot because they were too poor to afford a house to go gather up the sheep. Now, as the oldest child, he knew that his family was depending on those sheep for survival. So running through the brush in rubber boots, think like rain boots right here, sometimes for days without sleeping, Cliff would gather up the sheep and bring them safely home. So when he was shuffling through this 544-mile race of agony, Cliff just told him he was out there gathering sheep to save his family. and he just didn't stop. In the process, he shattered expectations of what is possible for an endurance race. See, it wasn't that the other competitors were incapable of doing what he did. In fact, now runners doing the same amount of time can run an additional 100 miles in that same time period. The difference is they just didn't know it was possible. We do this all the time. We tell ourselves stories that aren't necessarily true that limit our potential. We say things like, I'm just not a math person, or I'm fat, I'm slow, I'm not a good shooter, I'm shy, I get embarrassed easy, I crack under pressure. Now, those might not sound like stories, and when I say story, I don't mean like a long story. They're really just statements we make about ourselves, but these statements begin to form our identity, and they limit what we're able to do. There's a famous researcher who has done a ton of research over decades on why and how people are successful. Her name's Carol Dweck. She's a genius, and she has found that these stories that we tell ourselves are insanely important. She calls them a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, we just tell ourselves, that's just who I am. I am either fast or I'm not fast. I'm either a math person or I'm not a math person. Simple as that. But the problem is, that's not factually true. What it does is it stops us from taking any effort to learn or move forward or to progress. In fact, those who have studied the brain, in fact, a guy named Michael Merzenich, he's the father of neuroplasticity, neuro meaning brain, plasticity meaning that it can be molded or developed. He has intensely studied how the brain works for longer than you've been alive, basically for longer than I've been alive. And he's concluded that absolutely everyone can get better at virtually anything. What he's saying is that you can grow and develop at anything. You can get better at anything. You can reprogram your brain, you can learn anything. This idea that you can get better at anything is something called a growth mindset. And this is the starting point from everything you do to get better mentally. It's choosing to believe that you can learn, choosing to believe that you can grow. And when you fall short and when you fall back into those stories like, I'm just not fast, or I'm just not good, or whatever it is, just whenever you put limitations on yourself, it's choosing to let go of those limitations and to begin again and to start over. It means that you're willing to learn, period. It means that you believe you can learn, period. It means that you can get better at anything. Sometimes we tell ourselves fake stories about other people too. We say, she's just a born hitter. Or we say, you can't teach speed, that guy's just quick. And surely there are natural advantages. I'm not arguing that there are not. But when we focus only on those natural advantages, we don't take action. And when we don't take action, we don't grow, we don't learn, and we don't progress as a person, and we don't progress as an athlete. Those people got to where they're going by practicing, by being awkward at first, by learning skills and practicing, period. You just don't see the time they put into practicing, and therefore you make faulty assumptions. Your brain just fills in the gap. For example, my boy can spin a basketball on his finger just perfectly. He walks around the basketball court spinning a basketball on his finger. I try it and I look like a middle-aged awkward man. It's clumsy, it's awful. It looks so easy and natural for me. It is easy to assume, well, that's just his talent. He's just good at it. But I know that's not true because I live with him. I know that for months, this boy would obsessively spin the ball on his finger over and over again in our house, like all the time. That's why it looks natural. Not because it is natural, but because he's paid a price, because he did it obsessively over and over. But we're saying that it is a scientific fact that if you do the same thing, you will get better at whatever it is you want to do. Whether it is sports, whether it is making friends, whether it is business, whether it is just anything. I am telling you, you can get better if you are willing to pay the price and move forward, if you're willing to believe that you can learn. So here's our challenge for you today, and it's absolutely crucial that you do them. If you don't do the things we ask you to do after these videos, you won't get better. If you just watch them and you say, hey, I'll do it later, or I've got it in my mind, you will fail. You've got to do the things we ask you to do. It's like going to the gym and watching somebody do squats and expecting to be stronger in your legs just by doing that. It doesn't work. You've got to actually do it. So here's the challenge, right? Go grab your notebook, go grab a pen. Yeah, I would get a whole journal and we'll keep all this mental strength stuff in the same place. And it doesn't have to be like a Dear Diary journal with a locket or something like that. It can just be like a spiral notebook or something, okay? So number one, here's what I want you to do. First things first. There's gonna be 3 of them, all right? Number one, what stood out to you in the Cliff Young story? What do you think we can learn from that experience? Okay, number one, what stood out to you in the Cliff Young experience? Number two, what are your stories that limit you in sports and in other things? What are things that you say about yourself, about the way you look, about school, about relationships, sports? Write them all down, okay? Identify these things that limit you. And then number 3, who is someone that to you is evidence that you can master a new skill? Find a model. It can be somebody you know in real life. It can be somebody on YouTube, I don't care. Write down who they are, write down what they do well, and what you can learn from them, okay? What do we learn from Cliff Young? What are some stories you say about yourself? And who's somebody you can use for a model and watch and follow up on? All right, got it? Let's go do it. If you want some extra help talking through your mindset stories, nutrition, workouts, apply for the coaching. We'd love to talk with you one-on-one and help you on your journey. We're glad you're running with the tribe. Best wishes. We'll see you next time.